Outraged, God expels them from heaven and banishes them into the depths of the earth. This tale of Satan's jealousy and revenge is not found in the Holy Bible, yet it is among the stories told in the Quran, sacred scripture for Muslims, written 800 years later.
The Quran tells us that God creates human beings, Adam, out of clay, and that God creates these mysterious beings, jinn, out of what the Quran says is smokeless fire, fire without smoke. God calls Adam the greatest of God's creations and tells the angels to bow down before this creation. And one of them refuses. In the text of the Quran, Satan, Iblis, refuses to bow down. We're not sure what manner of being Satan is. So there's contention there among Muslims. You know, is this an angel that disobeys? Because how can the angels disobey God?
For Christians and Jews, the creation story in Genesis leaves a lingering question. If Adam and Eve had 2 sons and no daughters, if no other humans existed, who gave birth to humanity? One of the Holy Bible's more puzzling omissions is found in the book of Genesis, in the story of Adam and Eve's son, Cain. He murders his brother Abel, is cursed by God, and becomes a fugitive. Then, suddenly, we learn that Cain has a wife who is pregnant.
And Cain went out from the presence of the Lord and dwelt in the land of Nod on the east of Eden. And Cain knew his wife, and she conceived and bore Enoch.
Anyone who's ever taught Sunday school is familiar with the problem that you talk about Cain getting married, and suddenly a million hands go up. Wait a minute, where did the wife come from?
We know about Adam and Eve, of course, but what about their children, their sons? Who were the wives of the first males?
I think that the Bible story is disturbing on many levels, but some people find it most disturbing in the way that it doesn't make literal sense. That Cain obviously can't marry somebody who doesn't exist, and they can't get to the deeper levels until they find some kind of peace with the narrative level, with the story of what happened. And so for many, until we can figure out who Cain's wife was, we can't discuss the deeper issues.
Some 150 years before the birth of Jesus, an unknown author sought to clarify the telling of creation as written in the book of Genesis. It was a time in history when many Jews were being tempted by other faiths. The author wanted to maintain the purity of their beliefs to ensure strict observance of all Jewish law. His book, called Jubilees, offers intimate details of the lives and struggles of the first human beings. It begins with Moses. He is visited by an angel who reveals a secret behind-the-scenes version of Jewish history, from the very beginning of creation to the parting of the Red Sea.
I would suggest that the Book of Jubilees is what we would today call a fundamentalist book. Why? The Book of Jubilees tries to answer unanswered questions, to cross every T and dot every I of the stories in Genesis. They bleep over the parts that they don't think are particularly important, and they dwell on the issues that they want answered. He wants to take it too literally, and therefore gets boxed into a corner of having to explain every detail. And it comes out creating more problems than it actually solves.
Among the more disturbing revelations offered in Jubilees is a rather chilling answer to the mysterious and sudden appearance of a wife for Cain. Jubilees tells us that Adam and Eve have 9 sons and daughters, not just the 3 sons, Cain, Abel, and Seth, mentioned in Genesis. Jubilees also tells of Cain's younger sister, Awan, who becomes his wife.
And Cain took Awan his sister to be his wife, and she bare him Enoch at the close of the 4th Jubilee.
There is in the Bible a fairly powerful prohibition against incest, and clearly the idea that Cain married his sister would be very difficult for people. And it just shows how hard it was for people to accept that a new woman would come out of nowhere.
It's interesting to have folks in the 21st century reading Jubilees. The same people who like reality TV, the same people who will go to a movie such as Aliens, who seem to really sort of enjoy gore, violence, sex. Those sorts of folks just would seem to love Jubilees.
If the Bible is read as literal history, a story of the first humans that included incest would have been taboo and thus not acceptable for inclusion in the Holy Bible. Even so, why would this ancient author solve the problem of Cain's wife by having him marry his own sister?
This is a culture that is a little bit nervous about foreign women. And one of the ways to get over your nervousness about foreign women is to marry women who aren't that foreign. The problem is you marry women who aren't that foreign, they tend to be related.
It was important to the writer that God had chosen a pure race and that he had done this from the earliest times, and that this race had to remain pure. These would be the Jewish people in his own time, who were to refrain from intermarrying with their neighbors or really to have any contact with their neighbors to maintain purity.
I quite frankly find the way Jubilees recasts the Genesis stories so objectionable. I quite frankly think it was a laudable decision on the part of Judaism and Christianity to reject this book. They were familiar with it, they clearly read it, they knew it, and quite reasonably and in an informed way said, no, this is not part of the tradition. Who needs Jubilees?
Among those who studied the Book of Jubilees was a Jewish sect known as the Essenes. In 1947, a wandering shepherd stumbled upon their writings, tucked away in several caves overlooking the Dead Sea. This collection, lost for almost 2,000 years, became known worldwide as the Dead Sea Scrolls.